Warning: this talk mentions topics such as rape, violence, assault, and child abduction. My name is Meryl Hewitt. I'm an artist who focuses on taboos relating to women. Currently, I'm creating a collection called Divine Madness, inspired by the ancient philosophy that defends the modern term, "she's asking for it." So let's take a deeper dive into another phrase we've all heard before. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What a charming sentiment, right? It implies that beauty is subjective, personal, and unique to the viewer. But let's dig a little deeper. What happens when the beholder isn't just admiring, but scheming? If you're a woman, you already know where I'm going with this. Beauty, for better or worse, is a double-edged sword. On one side, it can open doors, attract kindness, and even win admiration. On the other, it can make you a target. Catcalls, stares, objectification, and worse, much worse. So let's rewind to ancient Greece, a time where beauty wasn't just an ordinary trait to be had or manufactured. It was divine. You see, the Greeks believed that beauty was a godly trait, just like magic, invisibility, super strength, everlasting life, and the world's knowledge, just to name a few. What makes beauty unique is that it's a trait that can even be held by mortals, which is why it's so dangerous. For the Greeks, if you saw something beautiful, it must have been divine. If movies have taught us anything, we have one or two reactions when we see a god or something godly. The classic representation of seeing something godly is usually a mortal not being able to handle it and then dying. An example being the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. When the Ark is opened, everyone who sees it melts to death. We can interpret this as mortals being unable to physically or mentally handle a divine being or object. Or you have the second option, when a person tries to capture or obtain an immortal object or trait. We see this in the film Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where the villain's goal is to get the world's knowledge, another form of a divine trait. But beauty is different. Beauty isn't transmissible. And you can't just become beautiful like you can learn knowledge. Beauty is complicated. So instead of trying to become divinely beautiful, the Greeks reasoned that people would try to capture beauty. Except capture is through rape, abduction, marriage, and slavery. This, by ancient Greek logic, made some sense. If you see something divine, then you're going to try and capture, own, or gain the divinity, because owning divine objects makes you godly. In this logic, it's common sense. But the thing is that beauty is a trait. It is attached to a person, and it is a person that you are trying to capture. So it seems that part of morality was left out of the idea of divine madness. With all that knowledge, one can understand why the Greeks believed beauty was a godly force, so powerful it could undo empires. Enter Helen of Troy, one of the most famous Western icons of beauty. She was the daughter of Zeus and a princess, and was considered the most beautiful woman to have ever existed. When Paris kidnapped her, the Prince of Troy and the famous Trojan War started. And so the saying goes, she has the face that launched 1,000 ships. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? But let's break it down. Helen's beauty didn't just launch ships, it launched chaos. Imagine being so beautiful that men started wars over you. Wars. People. Not an awkward love triangle, not a messy group chat, actual wars. But here's the thing, Helen wasn't just a passive beauty queen sitting on a pedestal. In some versions of her story, she's brilliant, clever enough to rival some of the smartest of all ancient Greek heroes. But have you ever heard about Helen the strategist? The thinker? Nope. Instead, history reduces her to a pretty face. And that's not even the worst part. The Greeks love to blame Helen for the Trojan War. They call her Kalon Kakon, evil beauty. Imagine that, being told your looks aren't just a blessing, they're a curse, a you problem. The problem wasn't just that she existed, it was that people couldn't handle her existence to begin with. Now, what's fascinating is there isn't just one Helen. Across myths, she's practically a shapeshifter. In some stories, she's a goddess-like figure wielding power. In others, she's a pawn, shuffled between men. Some Helens are suicidal, burdened by the destruction her beauty has caused. In one version, she even disfigures herself, deliberately maiming her looks to escape the endless pain they bring. Can we pause for a second? A woman is so exhausted by the consequences of being beautiful that she destroys the very thing everyone admires about her? That's not just tragic, it's a reflection of the stories women have lived throughout millennia. And then there's the version where Zeus, the king of all gods, and her father, swoops in and sends her to Egypt. There, she's placed under the protection of a very virtuous man. One who, get this, doesn't harm her. The Greeks wrote this like it was a huge plot twist. A man in proximity to Helen's beauty who doesn't violate her? Shocking. And yet he was not the only man to not objectify Helen. Another myth mentions Hector, the brother of Paris, the man who kidnapped her. Hector was known as the golden child of Troy, their best fighter and an all-up stand-up guy. Helen herself said Hector was one of her only true friends, one of the few people who treated her with kindness. No ulterior motives, no romantic tension, just genuine friendship. What's sad is this version of the story is forgotten. It is forgotten in modern day that it is possible to control lust just like Hector did. So let's zoom out. What do all these Helens tell us? They're not just different versions of a single woman. They're reflections of all womankind. The goddess, the pawn, the self-possessed queen, the victim, the survivor. They're all Helen, and they're all us. And yet, Helen's story isn't unique. She was kidnapped not once, but twice. The first man to abduct her was another famous Greek hero by the name of Theseus. He is renowned for killing the Minotaur, not for abducting Helen when she was just 7 years old. 7! Let that sink in. At that age, no one blamed Helen for her abduction. She was clearly the victim. But as she grew older and her beauty bloomed, the narrative shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't the men's fault anymore. It was hers. Sound familiar? It should, because we still do this today. When a woman is harassed, assaulted, or worse, the questions come rolling in. What was she wearing? Why was she out so late? Was she asking for it? Let's pause for a quick history lesson. The word rape comes from the Latin word rapito, which originally meant abduction, taking women often for marriage or slavery. It wasn't about the woman suffering, it was about stealing property, her father's property or her husband's, because back then, women weren't people, they were possessions. Fast forward to today, the language has shifted, but the sentiment hasn't. When we say, she was asking for it, we're echoing those ancient ideas. We're saying a woman's existence, her beauty, her body, is an invitation for harm. And let's not forget the Greeks' other invention, Hephaestus, also known as the god of blacksmithing. He created his golden robots. Perfectly beautiful, perfectly obedient women, crafted to be the ideal companions. But here's the twist. No one wanted them. Why? Because they lacked autonomy. Turns out what makes women desirable isn't just beauty, it's free will, the power to say no, the ability to make choices. And when someone takes that away, it's not just an act of violence, it's an act of control. That's what makes this so inconspicuous. Harm against women isn't just about desire. It's about domination, about silencing the no and erasing the autonomy that makes us human. So what do we do about it? How do we rewrite a narrative that has been embedded in our culture for thousands of years? First, we need to stop blaming beauty. Beauty is not the problem, the beholders are. Helen wasn't asking for it, and neither are we. Beauty shouldn't be a weapon, a burden, or an excuse for harm. Second, we need to shift the blame where it belongs. Stop asking, what was she wearing? And start asking, why did that person think it was okay? Let's hold the people accountable for their actions, not their impulses. And finally, we need to remember Helen in all of her forms, not just the face that launched 1,000 ships, but the brilliant mind, the survivor, and the woman who carried the weight of being too much for the world that couldn't handle her. Because beauty isn't a curse, it's a gift, and it's about time we started treating it and the people who possess it with the respect they deserve. So to Helen, wherever you are, this one's for you. You were never the problem, and neither are we.